The Rogue got a lot of love in the new 2024 Player's Handbook, but was it enough to bring the class into contention and kind of solve some of the lingering issues with the class? Well, in this video, we're going to find out as I discuss the Rogue class as presented in the 2024 Player's Handbook for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. So here is our agenda for this video. I'm going to give an overview of the class, talk about what I believe the role of the class, of the core class is. Then we'll talk about some key kind of system changes that have helped the Rogue or hurt them potentially. And then we're going to talk through all of the class features of the Rogue. I'm going to go through the core class features in the order presented. And all of the class features will be in the timestamp of this video if there's something specific you want to jump to. I'll also briefly cover the gist of what the 2024 updated subclasses do, although I'm not going to be covering them in depth in this video. We'll also talk about some general principles to optimize a character who is mostly a rogue, and then we'll talk about multiclassing with or as a rogue, and then I'll go into a summary and give some ratings of the class overall. So if you're new here, my name is Nathan, and on this channel I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons typically once a week. So if you like what you see, hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel would help me out and help other people to find these videos. So let's jump in and talk about the overview of the Rogue core class. So the Rogue as a class is a martial character, and they are typically historically and classically dexterity based. However, the 2024 rules have opened up ways for rogues to actually be primary in a mental ability score with dexterity as their secondary attribute. So that is something interesting that we will talk about as we go forward. The way the rogue wants to act in combat is primarily as an opportunistic skirmisher. Now, the rogue wants to find a target who they can hit with their signature ability, their sneak attack, and then they want to slip away. Their main defense is based on their spacing and overall being evasive as opposed to having a high armor class and hit points like something like a fighter or a paladin might. The rogue can also be ranged or melee. In my opinion, being ranged is generally superior, but melee rogue is actually better than ever due to some of the changes that the 2024 rules have introduced. The rogue is also a capable skill expert out of combat. Classically, the rogue wants to play as an infiltrator with stealth and sleight of hand and doing lockpicking and that kind of thing, but they are by no means restricted to this. You can perform pretty much any skill roll or potentially multiple skill rolls, assuming you have the right proficiencies to do so. All right, so here is the Rogue's class table of all their features, and they got a lot of very nice buffs under the 2024 rules, or some people call that tasty candy. So, what did the Rogues get that is new? Well, all the features here in green are new features. So we got Weapon Mastery, Cunning Strike, Improved Cunning Strike, and Devious Strikes. Improved Cunning Strike and Devious Strikes are both things that are kind of in the Cunning Strike tree and are based off of that. And we'll dive more in depth into these in just a few minutes. Now here in blue, these are all the features that the Rogue has that has been changed. These are mostly buffs or clarifications to how things are supposed to work. There was one feature that was removed. The Rogue used to get blind sight out to range of 10 feet at level 14, and that has been removed and replaced with the top feature for the Cunning Strikes kind of feature tree. All right, so key system changes. There's a few kind of key changes to the rest of the rules and what's available that really do affect the Rogue. So the first one is, and this is a big one, are weapon masteries, namely the Vex and Nick masteries. We'll talk about this more in a little bit as we dive more into the class features, but for these two masteries, these are particularly impactful for rogues. Vex is going to make getting your sneak attack a lot easier because it gives you advantage on follow-up attacks, and which the rogue just loves. And then Nick enables you to dual wield without sacrificing your bonus action, which is in very high demand for a rogue. Your bonus action is going to be spoken for a lot of the time. And so in the past, you had to use your bonus action to get that extra attack. The main benefit of dual wielding for a rogue, by the way, is not necessarily for damage. It's for a second chance to apply sneak attack every turn, and it's usually for reliability. Although under the 2024 rules, with the right choices, you can actually potentially make a rogue that has a lot of attacks per turn, and the Nick Mastery will be part of that. The next important thing to note are how the hide action has changed. So hiding in itself has changed, and it's a bit more complicated, and I'm not going to dive into it in this video, but it's now supposed to be a bit more clear, at least in my opinion, although it's still pretty muddy and convoluted, for how hiding is supposed to work. It's not really a change for the most part, but understanding and knowing how the hiding rules work is important for a rogue player, because hiding is one of the key ways that you use to get advantage, use it to sneak in, and a rogue is about it, so you do need to understand and know how it works. The next key change is actually the nerf to the sharpshooter feat. Now, this change, specifically the power attack ability of Sharpshooter was removed, the ability to take a -5 penalty to get a +10 damage buff. The removal of this feature from the Sharpshooter feat is actually an indirect buff to Rogue. Characters with Sharpshooter were the class's biggest competitor for range damage, and Rogues themselves didn't actually really want to use the Sharpshooter feat because that damage bonus was really good when you had more attacks and didn't have a whole lot of dice damage. And Rogues traditionally only have 1, maybe 2 attacks and a lot of dice damage. And so having all those raw dice does make that penalty payoff a lot less valuable. An optimized Rogue using some of the tactics that we'll cover later on in this video can now actually be extremely competitive as far as marshals go for range damage. And by range damage in this case, I'm talking about a character who deals their damage from at least 30 feet away. I don't think, there's a lot of builds that are floating out there that use some kind of close range damage buff spell like Conjure Minor Elementals or Spirit Shroud that then make ranged attacks from 10 feet away. I don't think that's really a ranged character. You're really just a melee character at that point, like a character with reach. So basically, because of the sharpshooter nerf, Rogue is actually a lot more competitive for a range damage character. And finally, the new and improved True Strike cantrip is a big deal for Rogues. So what this spell does, it provides you with additional scaling. So you get cantrip scaling with this, a d6 per kind of cantrip tier. And this spell works with your weapon range, so it can be used with ranged weapons like bows. And the interesting thing does is this is what shifts your main stat into a mental one, because this cantrip has you make your attack with your spellcasting ability. So this is the thing that opens up the intelligence, wisdom, or charisma primary rogue is this cantrip. It's also a spell which is very helpful for certain specific synergies. There's a lot of ways also that you can get True Strike on a character, whether it's with an origin feat. There's one that you can use. You can get it with your race. High Elf is just an example. There are others, especially if you use more content beyond the 2024 Player's Handbook. And there's plenty of classes and subclasses that you can use to get it, whether it's with the Arcane Trickster Rogue that does get spells or multiclassing with something else. The additional d6 per cantrip tier, so d6 level 5, 2d6 level 11, and 3d6 extra level 17, are a key part of helping the rogue be competitive for damage under the 2024 rules. Now, by no means do you have to use True Strike, but it is very good with the 2024 rogue. All right, so let's move into talking about our class features. So the rogue's primary ability is dexterity. They have a d8 hit dice, proficient in dexterity and intelligence saving throws. 4 skills off the list here. For what weapon proficiencies, they're proficient with simple weapons, and then any martial weapon that has the finesse tag or the light property. They're also proficient in thieves tools and proficient in light armor. In terms of things that have changed, the only thing that's changed here is they've expanded and simplified the martial weapons that you are proficient with, and this does include dropping the longsword off the list. As far as saving throws go, this class is not my favorite, but they can be decent, especially as you get to higher levels due to some of the class features they do have. The first ability that rogues get is expertise. So you gain expertise in 2 of your skill proficiencies of your choice. What this means is you pick a skill that you're already proficient in, and you get to double your proficiency bonus for checks you make with that skill. At level 6, you also get expertise in 2 additional skill proficiencies. Now, there was one change here. This feature also used to let you pick thieves tools as one of your expertises instead of one of your skills, but you can't do that anymore. However, there has been a rules change under the 2024 rules, and it is this. If you're proficient in both the skill and the tool used for a check, for example, picking a lock is sleight of hand with thieves tools, you will use whatever your higher bonus is between those, and you'll make the check with advantage. one of the other things here is you could be proficient with one and not the other and still make the check with proficiency. So they have helped the skill and tool rules a little bit there, and I think that's probably why this feature doesn't give you expertise in Thieves tools anymore. Next up at level 1 is Sneak Attack, and this is kind of the big rogue core feature, and this hasn't really changed, but I will explain how it works. So the number of damage dice that you get for your sneak attack, or its number of d6 equal to your rogue level divided by 2 rounded up, and we saw that in the table, and that will be consistent throughout all levels. So the wording on this, it says once per turn we can deal extra damage to one creature we hit with an attack roll if we have advantage on the roll and the attack uses a finesse or ranged weapon, and the extra damage is the same as the weapon's type. You don't need advantage on the attack roll if at least one of your allies is within 5 feet of the target and doesn't have the incapacitated condition, and you don't have disadvantage on the attack roll. Importantly, any attack stat works with this, not just dexterity, so long as the weapon's tags match. So, if you're doing the whole True Strike thing, as long as you're using a finesse or a ranged weapon, you can still apply sneak attack. Now, the once per turn aspect, and the reason I bolded that is this is really important for rogue optimization. We can trigger sneak attack potentially more than once per round, and we'll talk more about this later. Also at level 1, we get Thieves Cant, so we know Thieves Cant and one other language of our choice. Only change here is that Thieves Cant is now a language, and this feature gives you an additional language proficiency. So while this is a ribbon, I would say this is a minor buff. Also at level 1, our final feature, we get weapon masteries. So we can use the mastery properties of 2 weapons of our choice with which we have proficiency, and whenever we finish a long rest, we can change out the kinds of weapons that we want to use. Now, like most of the 2024 marshals, rogues do get this feature, and the flexibility with a long rest swap is really nice if so you're not, stuck being unable to use the mastery properties of magic weapons that you might find later. Generally speaking, Vex and Nick I think are the most important masteries for a rogue. Like weapons that have those are probably the ones that you want to use. Additionally, an important thing to note here, even if you get proficiency with all the weapons in the game, the only masteries that are available on weapons that meet the qualifications for sneak attack are Nick, Vex, Slow, and Push. So you don't have access to all of them. Those are the only ones that a rogue is probably realistically going to be using. Moving on to level 2, rogues get Cunning Action. So once per turn, you can take a bonus action to dash, disengage, or hide. This is one of the rogue's signature features. It's unchanged, but this is one of our key tools for our hit, run, and hide kind of play style. It is really good and can be applicable on just about any character if you want to take the rogue levels. Moving on to level 3, rogues get their subclass. Now the 4 presented in the new 2024 Player's Handbook are the Arcane Trickster, the Assassin, the Soul Knife, and the Thief. And these have all seen a fairly significant updates since the versions when they were last published, other than the Soul Knife. The biggest change to the Soul Knife, I think, is that their Psychic Blades now have they have a mastery property that you get to use, which is nice. Rogue subclasses get additional features at levels 9, 13, and 17. Usually, especially if we take these new subclasses as kind of the general standard, the features are generally pretty good at all the levels. However, the big gap between level 3 and level 9 is kind of a bit of a bummer and makes it so your rogue feels pretty samey for a lot of play, especially if you're playing on a table that doesn't go much past level 12. You may not be able to see those high level rogue features actually ever come into play, and this is a little bit of a pain point for rogue in general. Also at level 3, we get the Steady Aim feature, and this was a direct port out of this feature from Tasha's. So what this does is, as a bonus action, we can gain advantage on our next attack roll on the current turn, and we can use this feature only if we haven't moved during the turn, and after we use it, our speed is 0 until the end of the current turn. Now this is a good tool to set up your sneak attack when you can't hide or don't have a Vex chain going. So what a Vex chain is, just real quick, if you hit an enemy with a Vex weapon, you get advantage on your next attack against them. So if you hit them again with the Vex weapon, you get advantage again, and you can keep doing that until the target dies, or until you miss, or until you can't attack them on a turn for some reason. So this is a good option to use when you potentially need to swap targets, although it does cost you your bonus action on that turn if there's not another easier way to do it, like hiding. At level 4, rogues get their first ability score increase or feat, same as everyone else, and rogues get additional feats at levels 8, 10, 12, 16, and 19. So the feat at level 10 is unique among all classes, and remember, epic boon feats are available at character level 19+. Now, I want to take this time to talk about some feats I recommend both for Origin and just general feats. As far as Origin feats for a rogue, I would generally recommend Alert, Lucky, Magic Initiate, Wizard, or Skilled. Alert lets you have better initiative and potentially swap with an ally. So if you need to wait until an ally is in position so you can sneak attack, that can be a good thing to do. Or if you're a subclass that needs to go first, like the Assassin, you can use that to swap with an ally who beat the enemies on initiative, and that can be a very useful thing to have. The Lucky feature you can use to get advantage on any D20 test before rolling. The advantage here as a rogue is you can use this to help you switch targets, or potentially to start a sequence of advantage using the Vex chain method as we talked about. So this is a very nice thing to have in combat, and you can use this benefit a number of times per long rest equal to your proficiency bonus. Next up is Magic Initiate Wizard. So this gives you 2 wizard cantrips of your choice, and also gives you 1 first level wizard spell of your choice that you can cast once per long rest without spending a spell slot, as well as being able to cast that spell with any other slots you might have. You also get to pick the casting stat for the spells you use here, so it can be intelligence, wisdom, or charisma. So notably, True Strike is a wizard spell, and you can get it with this Origin feat. You can also get Find Familiar with this Origin feat, and since Find Familiar is a ritual, you can cast it without spending a spell slot anyways. And having a familiar is really good for a rogue. Not only does it give you an ally that can be next to your enemies, but it also gives you an entity who can provide the help action for you or an ally to get advantage, and you can potentially use that to start your sneak attack chains. And then finally, skilled. Rogues are really good if you have a lot of skill proficiencies, especially with a feature that we'll get at level 7. And so this is something you can use to just be even better out of combat. It's not, obviously it has no combat impact, but it can be very good. As far as general feats, here's just a quick list. This is not exhaustive by any means, and there are more options beyond this depending on what your build is and your role in the party. But Mage Slayer can be great to fortify your mental saves, especially if you're not going up to level 15 or beyond in your campaign. Crossbow Expert lets you dual wield hand crossbows, which can be very fun and gives you a way to have a bonus action attack. Defensive Duelist is a great way to potentially boost your rogue's armor class if you're in melee using a finesse weapon. Resilient you can use to fortify your saves, especially if you don't want Mage Slayer and you're not going until 15 or higher. Speedy gives you more speed, especially if you're melee, and gives opportunity attacks disadvantage against you and just generally makes you more mobile. Skill Expert gives you more skill proficiencies and more skill expertise. You can use Sharpshooter to ignore cover and extend the range of some of the shorter ranged rogue weapons like the hand crossbow. And then finally, Dual Wielder, if you are melee, can be very good on a rogue to potentially convert that bonus action into a third attack. A rogue with Nick Mastery and Dual Wielder can potentially attack 3 times in a turn, twice with their action and once with their bonus action, even though the class doesn't have extra attack. And that can be very valuable, although you do kind of sacrifice potentially some of the class's ability to kite because you won't have your bonus action available to do something like disengage or dash. Moving on to level 5, we got Cunning Strike. So this is a new feature. What this does is when we deal sneak attack damage, we can add one of the following effects, which we'll see on the next slide. And each effect with Cunning Strike has a dice cost, which is the number of sneak attack dice you have to forego to add the effect. And the dice are removed before rolling, and the effect occurs immediately after the attack's damage is dealt. And if any ability requires a saving throw, the DC is 8 plus our dex plus our proficiency bonus. So if you are one of those new age rogues who's using a mental stat for their attacks, it will not be quite as good as a rogue who's using dexterity. Importantly here, since the dice are removed before we roll them, this will have a negative impact on crits and it will take them out of the pool to be potentially doubled. So the features that are, the options that are available for Cunning Strike here at level 5 are Poison, Trip, and Withdraw. So what Poison does, the target has to make a Constitution save, or they have the Poison condition for 1 minute, and they can make a saving at the end of each of their turns to end it, and you have to have a Poisoner's Kit on yourself. The Poison condition gives disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks, so this can be useful, although there are a decent amount of enemies that are immune to it, and Constitution is normally not the best save to target on a lot of enemies. Next up is Trip. We can spend 1d6 to force a large or smaller target to make a dexterity save, having the prone condition on a failure. That can be nice to set up your allies and potentially retreat or slow down an enemy. I think it's probably the best one of the three here. And then finally, Withdraw. This also costs a d6, but immediately after the attack, we can move up to half our speed without provoking opportunity attacks. I think overall here, Poison and Trip are okay control options, especially for a class that didn't have any kind of control options whatsoever before. That being said, other marshals can inflict similar levels of control with weapon masteries that the rogue can't use with sneak attack. So I don't think these are really that great. However, Withdraw actually has a decent use case for melee rogues who still want to use their bonus action, such as for Cunning Action Dash, or to make an attack with the Dual Wielder feat, to kite. So you can sacrifice that 1d6 of damage to be able to get out after you make the attack. Also, level 5, we get Uncanny Dodge. So when an attacker we can see hits us with an attack roll, we can use our reaction to have the attack's damage against us, and we round down. There are no changes here. This is a decent defensive feature, and it basically doubles your health in situations where there's only one powerful attack against you per turn. If you do have multiple reaction options for defense, like say you took Defensive Duelist, generally speaking, taking no damage is better than taking half. So if you could use a different reaction to block the damage entirely, you should probably do that. And then if they have a multi-attack, taking half damage is usually better than taking all of it and hoping to block the next attack, at least most of the time. That really does depend on the enemy's attack bonus and how hard they hit and that kind of thing. But generally speaking, if I have both, if I can block the attack, I do. Otherwise, I use Uncanny Dodge and see what happens on the future ones. This is a pretty cool feature and definitely fits the class themes of being slippery and evasive. The next feature doesn't come until level 7. And we get Evasion, which says that when we're subjected to an effect that allows us to make a dexterity save to take only half damage, we instead take no damage at all if we succeed on the save and only half if we fail. And they've added this line that says we can't use this feature if we're incapacitated. This is a new clause. It's still a very powerful feature, again matching the class themes. The old version of you being able to use it while incapacitated didn't really quite make sense. Like if you were paralyzed or immobile, you could still dodge things with this. So I think overall this change is fine and kind of in line with other things in the game. Next up, level 7, we get Reliable Talent, which says that whenever we make an ability check that uses one of our skill or tool proficiencies, we can treat a d20 roll of 9 or lower as a 10. So this, they basically cleaned up the wording. The old version actually could potentially work with initiative, oddly enough, and they moved it 4 levels sooner. So this used to be at level 11. While this is certainly a very powerful feature and potentially fun, it does make certain aspects of the game trivial. So a rogue will basically no longer need to roll the dice for some things. Like let's say that you have to make a sleight of hand check to pick a lock. The DC is 15, you're proficient and you have expertise and you have a say +4 dex at this point. The minimum that you could get on that roll would be a 20. There's actually an argument here that for checks that you can't fail at, the Dungeon Master can and should stop having you roll the dice, which is one of the things where this you don't get to use Reliable Talent because the DM's like, okay, great, you unlock the door. So that's the potential kind of fun killing part of this feature, although I think at most tables that really doesn't come up. This feature being here at level 7 is why an Origin feat-like skill is good for a rogue, because the more things you can be proficient in, the more things that you can use with this. The next feature doesn't come until Rogue level 11, and this feature is Improved Cunning Strikes. So now we can use 2 Cunning Strike effects when we deal sneak attack damage, paying the dice cost for each effect. Now, the core rogue only has 3 options at this point, right? We've got Poison, Trip, and Withdraw. We will get more soon-ish in like 3 levels, but that being said, one of the published subclasses, the Thief, does actually get a Cunning Strike option at level 9, and there's another subclass, the Assassin, that has a feature that augments one of the existing options at level 13. So I wouldn't be surprised going down the line in the future if there are more subclasses introduced that have other Cunning Strike options. As this is with the core class, I don't really see you using this very much at level 11, just because you probably wouldn't want to apply more than one of those 3 basic effects. And you probably really want to be dealing your damage, and there are probably other people in your party who can do better control at this point. The next feature comes at level 14, which is Devious Strikes, which is the one I was talking about that gives you more options. So this gives you more Cunning Strike options, and remember, you can use 2 per attack now if you really want to. So the 3 that you get here, the first one is Daze, which costs 2d6 sneak attack dice. The target makes a Constitution save, and on a failure, they can only do one of the following on their next turn. They can move, take an action, or take a bonus action. This is actually a relatively crippling effect. The next one is Knockout, which costs you 6d6. Remember, your base sneak attack at this level is only 7d6. So the target again makes a Constitution save, and if they fail, they get the unconscious condition for 1 minute or until they take any damage, and they get to repeat the saving throw at the end of each of their turns, ending the effect on a success. This is actually really powerful if you can land it. Again, Constitution saves are usually pretty high for a lot of enemies, but knocking an enemy unconscious does take them completely out of the fight and sets up for potentially a big crit from another character or potentially from you on a later round. So this is one where it's really like swinging for the fences and trying to hit a home run. Either you knock it out of the park and it does really well, or you just sacrificed a bunch of damage to accomplish nothing at all. So when it works, it'll be great. When it doesn't work, it'll be pretty disappointing. And the final one here is Obscure, which costs you 3d6. Targets a dexterity save, which are usually a little better to the target at these higher levels, and the target is blinded until the end of their next turn on a failure. Now, these are much more powerful control abilities than the abilities we got all the way back at level 5. Although, remember, they do come at the highest, they come at significantly higher dice costs. I think Obscure here is probably going to be the easiest to land. Although Blinded, the usefulness of it against various enemies is debatable, especially if enemies like have True Sight and that kind of thing. At level 15, rogues get Slippery Mind, which gives them proficiency in Wisdom and Charisma saving throws. This feature only used to give you proficiency in Wisdom saves, so this is a buff to add Charisma. This is a really great feature. It's a bit of a shame that it's all the way out here at level 15. Again, a lot of campaigns don't get to this high level, so you might have to do other things to fortify your mental saves if you're not going to be playing this long. An interesting thing here, though, is if you took the Resilient feat for Strength or Constitution, a rogue could be proficient in 5 out of the 6 saves in the game at this point. At level 18, rogues get Elusive. This feature was not changed. What this does is it says no attack roll can have advantage against us unless we're incapacitated. This is an okay feature, but remember, rogues typically don't have the best armor class. Remember, light armor, no shield proficiency, no real way to boost your armor class unless you take feats or get spells. And remember, monsters at this level also usually have a really high attack bonus. So this is a minor, pretty conditional defensive boon. I don't think it's really that great of a feature, and it wasn't that great of a feature under the 2014 rules either. And finally, at level 20, we get Stroke of Luck, and this is the Rogue Capstone. So this has been changed. What it does now is that if we fail a D20 test, we can just turn the roll into a 20. And we can do this once per short or long rest. This is a really solid and effective change. You used to be able to use this to turn a miss into a hit with an attack, but making it a critical hit is a lot better. Importantly, there's also an epic boon feat that you can get that will turn a miss into a hit once per turn anyways. That is, I think that's the boon of combat prowess. That particular boon is really good on a rogue. And you can use this for a wide variety of things. It's available fairly often. I think it's a decent capstone, but it's not, because it's a, once per rest type feature, it's not super stellar. All right. So let's talk a little bit about optimizing the rogue. Now I'm going to be pretty broad here. Obviously there's a lot of ways to do this, and rogue, as with many of the classes in the game, if you multi-class, there's a lot of things that you can do with it. So there are 2 main pillars of rogue optimization. The first pillar, and this is a pretty easy one to do, is you want to have reliable advantage with minimal action economy to accomplish it. This enables easy, consistent sneak attacks. You can do this actually pretty easily with the base rogue class, Vex Mastery, and the Lucky Origin feat, for example, or potentially using a bonus action to swap targets. You can potentially chain advantage pretty easily. Something like the Elven Accuracy feat, if you play with that content, is really good here too. Importantly, this leaves your bonus action free for the most part to do other things. Normally, an unoptimized rogue would use their bonus action to hide or steady aim just to get advantage. But if you can get advantage without doing that, again, that frees up your bonus action to do other things. Now, the second pillar, and this pillar kind of builds on the first pillar, is find a way to reliably trigger 2 sneak attacks per round. So because sneak attack is once per turn, if we can attack an additional time on a different turn, we can basically double our damage, and this is what makes rogue more competitive with other optimized martials. we will need to be able to attack reliably with our reaction to be able to do this, and this does actually have defensive consequences. For example, this will turn off your Uncanny Dodge and other abilities like Defensive Duelist or casting the Shield spell and that kind of thing. Usually the best way to do this is to have some way to attack as a bonus action unconditionally and then taking the ready action to be able to attack as a reaction. Some other things that can be nice on a rogue, getting armor to improve your armor class is really nice. Getting a fighting style, potentially to boost your attack if you're an archer, or potentially to add your dexterity to your offhand attacks if you're a dual wielder is a good thing to get. Getting extra attack for just more damage and more chances to trigger sneak attack is great. And then spells, of course, in general are good on any character, and they are great on a rogue. So with that understanding of how just generally speaking, a main class rogue wants to optimize, let's jump into talking about multiclassing the rogue. So to multiclass the rogue, the minimum requirement you need to take a level outside of rogue or take a level into rogue if it's not your first class is 13 dexterity. And this is a really easy prerequisite for just about any class to meet, with the exception of maybe paladins. In terms of proficiencies you get if you take a level in rogue and it's not your first class, you get light armor, 1 skill off the rogue class list, and proficiency in thieves tools. There are no changes here from the 2014 rules, by the way. Note importantly that rogue multiclassing doesn't give you proficiency with any weapons at all. All right, so in my opinion, the rogue, generally speaking, goes best with fighter and ranger. These are extra attack classes, so that offers you a boost there. They give you potential fighting styles to pair with however you want to do combat. Although I will say having the Nick Mastery overall does make the dip for extra attack a little less necessary for a melee build. That said, dexterity and ranged versions of these classes, fighter and ranger, actually probably want rogue levels to scale damage into the late game now after getting extra attack, just because they don't have that sharpshooter bonus to apply onto those ranged attacks anymore. Now, that being said, based on what we talked about from optimizing, rogue also goes really well with sorcerer and cleric, particularly war domain cleric. So if you're optimizing for double sneak attacks, these two are actually probably some of the best ways to do it. So sorcerer has innate sorcery, which gives you advantage on attack rolls with all sorcerer spells. If you get true strike from sorcerer, it is a sorcerer spell and you will have advantage. That solves pillar number 1. Next, sorcerer has quicken spell meta magic, which you can use to cast a spell as a bonus action. No prerequisite there whatsoever. So you can bonus action true strike at the cost of 2 sorcery points. That will leave your main action free to ready another true strike to attack on someone else's turn. This is the kind of core principle of my Draconic Trickster build, which uses this, and you can check that build out up there if you want to. As for War Cleric, they specifically can make a bonus action attack with a weapon unconditionally, a wisdom modifier times per short or long rest, and they can then take the ready action to fire off a true strike or another weapon attack. I do have an upcoming build I'm planning on using this with. It's in the works. It should be coming out pretty soon, and once that build is done, I will link a card for it up there that you can check out. As for other classes that the rogue can work with, I want to call out Barbarian here specifically. Because of how Barbarian's reckless attack has improved and will actually work when it's not your turn to give you advantage, this one's actually really good. Now remember, weapon tags, not the ability that you make the attack with, are what matter for sneak attack. So as long as it's with a finesse weapon, you can use a, say a rapier. You can use your strength and get all the benefits from Barbarian, like reckless attack and rage damage, and still get sneak attack because the weapon's tags match. You can also take rogue levels on just about any other class in the game. Taking rogue levels is pretty easy kind of non-combat optimization for a lot of classes, and you can also use it to snag masteries while you're at it. Cunning Action is great if you kind of want to play that elusive playstyle, and again, it's really easy for most characters to have a 13 or higher dexterity, and you should be able to qualify this for this pretty easily, and unless you're some kind of strength primary character that dump dexterity, like for example a paladin or maybe a great weapon fighter. All right, so let's go into a summary and some ratings for the rogue class as a whole. So under the 2014 rules, these are the ratings I gave them. So a 2 in offense, a 3 in defense, a 1 in control, 1 in support, 4 in skills, and 2 in complexity. So first up is offense, and I give the rogue a 2+. So offense is kind of the ability of the rogue of the class to do damage, and this is a bit better for the core rogue, thanks almost entirely to weapon masteries, namely Vex, and a little bit thanks to True Strike. Now the plus here, this is kind of like my half rating. It's definitely better than it was in 2014, but in my opinion, it's not enough to warrant another star. So when you see the pluses appearing in this video and future class overviews, that's what the star means. As for defense, I still give them a 3 out of 5. Their defense is a little better at level 15 plus due to the extra saving throw proficiency. But again, it's level 15 plus. Charisma is an uncommon save. That's not enough to impact the rating, at least in my opinion. Next up is control, and I give them now a 2 plus, as opposed to a 1 when they have basically had no abilities before. Their control is much better by comparison, thanks mostly to Cunning Strike and a little bit to masteries if you're going to use one of the ranged weapons that has push or slow. It's still not really that great control, and it pales in comparison to other marshals, at least until you're level 14 or higher and have access to Daze, Knockout, and Blind. Their control is resource free, but again, so is a lot of the other control that a lot of other marshals have gotten under the 2024 rules. Additionally, a lot of enemies are actually immune to the effects of a lot of your stunning strikes, especially as you get to those higher levels. Next up is support. I gave them a 1, which is basically nothing before, and I give them a 2 now. This is mainly due to the new Cunning Strikes being able to do things to help your allies, like knocking enemies prone. Now, one of the things I said in my 2014 overview is that the rogue is generally a selfish class. This is still very much true. The rogue, a lot of their abilities are primarily focused on helping themselves, although they did get some things under the 2024 update that make them a little bit less selfish. They're still overall a selfish class. Next up is skills, and I give the rogue a 4 plus here. So the earlier reliable talent being level 7 instead of level 11 helps a lot, and the skill and tool rules giving you advantage on the check is also helpful. They still don't have the raw creative power a caster does with spells, and this is the main thing that the rogues are really lacking here when it comes to making their skills better. And finally, complexity. So this is a measure of how difficult it is to play the class, with a higher rating being more difficult and a lower rating being easier to play. And this generally correlates with the number of decisions you have to make, whether it's in character creation or in combat and that kind of thing. Now the rogue is still, in my opinion, a relatively easy class. I've given them a 2 plus here. That plus is because they've added a little bit more complexity with masteries and Cunning Strike. But other than that, the rogue is still relatively simple. You still need a good understanding of game mechanics to kind of figure out and understand how hiding and sneak attack work, which is basically why I've given it 2 stars. But once you understand that, the rogue class is really not all that difficult. So thanks for watching. Overall, this has been our summary of the new rogue under the 2024 rules, and in my opinion, rogue is actually the weakest class under the 2024 rules, but the gap between it and the next worst class, in my opinion, is a lot smaller. But hey, I do want to know what you think. What do you think of the 2024 rogue? Are they good? Do you think they're the worst? Let me know in the comments, and also I want to know if you've had any fun experiences with a rogue or anything else you've done that's clever to optimize a rogue. I think an important thing here is that when you actually play a rogue on an actual game, it does feel very powerful, especially if you're a new player watching someone else play a rogue. The rogue, one of the things they're good at is producing large numbers. Whether it's a single attack that does a bunch of damage, you get to roll a bunch of dice, or it's a large number on a skill check. Those numbers, whether it's the damage or the skills, it looks pretty impressive, again, especially to a new player. And creating a character that's more powerful than even the most basic rogue does take a little bit of experience and some understanding of the game. And I think that rogue overall as a class is one that has a high floor for performance, but also a relatively low ceiling, at least until you start to optimize. And even then, with the optimization that we talked about, it barely brings you in line or close to other optimized marshals, especially if they're, once they use spells, they kind of start to come up pretty high above you. But, all that said, I think the rogue is still a very playable, very fun class, very thematic, and with the right RP, you can, be a team player and don't have to be that edgy rogue that a lot of people hate. So I have already done Sorcerer in a previous video, so our next class overview is going to be on Warlock. So once again, my name is Nathan. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.